Well, hey, you, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Hippie Podcast. I'm your host, Michaela. If you are watching on YouTube, then you can see Willie over my right shoulder. And today I wanted to bring you a really special episode. And it's special because it's special to me. And I believe it's special to you too, because in the last few years, I've noticed a trend in the internet, healing spaces, on the Instagram, the interwebs, if you will, that people are starting to tell their audiences that purpose isn't important. And I have to be honest with you, I think this is actually just coming from a really bitter place. I think a lot of people have chased things that weren't aligned with who they really are, and they got all the things that they thought would make them happy. And since those things didn't make them happy, instead of sitting and looking inward, they're blaming the thing, they're blaming the purpose because they thought something was their purpose and it actually wasn't. And the problem is not purpose. And the reason this broke my heart is because I am someone that has looked for my purpose for especially arguably my whole life, but a lot the last few years. And I have found some things that have been super helpful for me, some tools and exercises that I'm going to share with you today. But first, I want to start off with the perspective on purpose. Like, what is purpose if we actually just dial it down? And to me, when I see and look at purpose, I see a puzzle. And when we look at a puzzle, we know that that puzzle is made up of 500, 1,000, 1,500, however many pieces. The puzzle is your purpose. And then underneath that puzzle are all of these pieces that come together to create said purpose. And so a lot of times when it comes to purpose, we think that it's one big thing. It's not. It's all these little pieces that come together and create this one thing. And so when it comes to finding our purpose, we just need to be aware and know that there are going to be many pieces, many components, and many factors that create this thing that is our purpose, that is this puzzle of our purpose. And so with further ado, let's get into the three exercises that you can do to find your purpose very quickly and very easily. And while this is not going to give you that whole puzzle, because the puzzle is not going to be done until your life is done, we're going to constantly be putting pieces to this puzzle. So while the puzzle is not going to be done, you're not going to have that full picture, that full puzzle together today. You are going to have some steps and some pieces that are going to start putting you on the path to your purpose. Because here's the thing, we actually don't want our full purpose on the first day. We just want to start feeling purposeful again. And what is that feeling of purposeful? I'm going to tell you what it is to me, but I actually want you to sit with it and figure out, what does that mean to you? And to me, feeling purposeful is making a difference in the world. It is doing something that matters to me. And maybe it doesn't matter to the world at large yet, but I know it's going to. The key thing is it matters to me. It makes me feel like I matter. It makes me like I'm doing something that really comes from the heart, that comes from my soul. And I am the last person that usually says, like, I find this stuff to that dialogue to be like really corny, but it is true. It is this something that, like, if you think of your soul as the soil and your purpose as that flower that comes from it, that's what feeling like purposeful is to me. It is this flower that blooms from within, if you will. And so find and really put specific words as to what purpose means to you. Again, if I had to put it into one sentence, it's doing things that matter to me and that I feel like make a big difference in the world and in individual people's lives, whether that's a form of art, whether that is learning a new modality to help somebody with, whether that is making this podcast for you today. Like, that is what feels purposeful to me, because that's what you're actually looking for. We are looking for our purpose, but the thing that we just need to feel today, again, we don't need to have that full picture. We just need to start feeling purposeful today. And that starts with finding the things that matter to us. And so the first way that we are going to find something that deeply matters to us is we are going to look at the most painful experiences that we experienced from the time we were born to when we were 21. And if you're watching this video and you're not quite 21 yet, that's okay. Just take your younger years. So if you're 18, 0 to where you're at today, if you're 20, 0 to 20, like wherever you're at, just go from there. If you are older 20, you really want to look at those first experiences from 0 to 21. And I want you to list one. Don't go over 5, but at least 1 to 3 things of the most painful experiences that you experienced in your childhood. Now, the thing is, there's going to be 1 to 2 experiences that are so obvious. So if I look at my childhood, I'm looking at the sexual experience, the sexual assault experience that I walked through, and I'm looking at losing my childhood dog. Those are the 2 obvious ones. And I want to push you to find a couple more that are less obvious. So to me, which this is really interesting, but I think think because I was so young, I'd buried it. The ones that were less obvious to me were my parents splitting up. The ones that were less obvious to me was when I was in first grade, I had someone who I thought was my friend choose another group of friends over me. And I just loved her so much. And she went left and I went right. And I was like, okay, now what? And so those were like the less like obvious ones to me, but those are going to be important. So find the first two. So again, you just need two major ones, but I also want you to encourage you later down the road to start looking at these less obvious ones because again, those are going to be just more pieces to this purpose puzzle, if you will. So find those, and then I want you to write them down. So grab a pen. If you haven't, pause this and grab a pen and a piece of paper. And then I want you to list 3 or 5 good things that have come from this. Now, if you haven't done the trauma work to neutralize and say, like, there is no bad, like, there is no good to this situation, it was all bad, and this son of a bitch did this, da 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 da. If you haven't done that work, you might need to go do that work first because it's not going to help. If you are in a neutral position on these painful experiences, you need to find 3 to 5 things of good that came or beneficial. If you don't even want to say good, beneficial that came from these situations. So if I go look at the sexual assaults, I was not as compassionate of a person as I am now. And I do believe compassion is an asset that I have today. And creating spaces where people feel comfortable talking to me, I could not have had those things had I not gone through the sexual experiences. So those are 2 things I would write down: compassion and then the ability to talk to just about anybody on a really deep level. Those are 2 good things that came from the sexual assault experience. I could also I got ended up because of that situation. I have a horse. I was 12 years old when it happened. I'm 29 now. I still have that horse. I could list having Pepper as a positive situation. Really, the ability to stand up for myself. You know, we went through the judicial systems and the court trials, and it was just an absolute shit show that I will get into another day. But that was another good thing that came from it. I really learned how to stand up for myself. And so I just want you to keep listing. And then I would go to the next one. So again, for me, I would write down losing my childhood dog and like what good came from it. Again, when I first started this exercise, I didn't want to acknowledge it, but when Willie got sick, I pushed harder than 99.9% of people would have because that experience was so painful for me, right? It's not that losing a dog is not painful for everyone, but everyone does experience pain at a different depth. And because that was one of my core wounds, I pushed harder than most people would have to get Willie well. And because I pushed that hard and have tried all these different modalities, now I get to share them with other people and I get to help other dogs. And we have now currently successfully rehabbed 2 dogs, other people's dogs, that vets said should have been put down. So these are some of the good things that have come of those really hard and bad situations that make me feel purposeful, that make me feel like I'm living my life on purpose. So again, keep going, write 3 to 5 things. And really what I want you to do, 3 to 5 things at least, but I want you to start feeling like there was some purpose in that situation. That is the goal that we're going for. So once you have those painful experiences and start to feel like you are feeling some purpose about those situations, now let's move on to the next step, which is the passion. And so, on the passion front, when you go back to those painful childhood experiences that we had just talked about, that you just listed out, what gave you passion in those moments? Meaning, what is the thing that kept you alive even when you wanted to give up? Even when, like, this was the thing, like, if I could just get to this part of my day, I might feel okay. So, maybe you were going in your room and you were listening to music. Maybe you started drawing. Maybe you had sports. Maybe, like me, you had horses that you turned to. Maybe you had a dog that you turned to, like me. But what were the things that kept you going in your childhood when you really wanted to give up? So again, for me, I would list horses, my dogs, I would list music, I would list going to ride, I would list like writing. Like one of the things I explain is writing helped me process the emotions. Like, how do I say it? My hands translated the words that my mouth couldn't speak. And like that's why writing became such a purposeful thing in my life because it was able to transmute these emotions that I didn't know what the fuck to do with. And so those are the things that will contribute to our purpose because that is where we found purpose when we felt like we had none. So again, go back to those painful experiences, take yourself back to that time period and start listing 3 to 5 things that gave you purpose during those times when you felt like life was pointless. And then after that, we need to go to your person. Now, I'm going to go more into this on a podcast episode and a YouTube video with aligning with your purpose because our person is important because our person is who we are at our core. And who we are at our core becomes, and our identity in general, even if we're not being who we are at our core, is our GPS that guides us through life. And so if we're being the wrong person, then we won't be on the right path. And if we are not on the right path, then we are not going to run into the right people. And if we don't meet the right people, we might not make the right connections, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can extrapolate and keep going with that. And so who we are at our core is the most important thing we can ever do. So I want you, on the same like pen and or piece of paper and pen that you have, I want you to flip the page if you have a journal. If you don't have a journal and have blank pages, I want you to grab 3 blank pages out. And for 3 pages, and it's going to be hard, but the reason we want to go for 3 pages is because after the page and a half to 2, you're going to start getting down into your subconscious, and our subconscious is where the answers live. And so for 2 to 3 pages, you need to get to 3. You need to get to 3. Sorry, but you do. Actually, you're welcome. You'll thank me later. Let's go with that. Um, you want to journal on the prompt, who was I before I was told it was not okay? So were you told you were too much in your childhood? Were you told you were too sassy? You were too rambunctious? You were too energetic? Like, especially for young boys, I see that it's interesting because young boys are told their energy is too much, and young girls are told their emotions are too much. So I want you to keep journaling on what parts of yourself that you had to abandon in order to keep yourself safe and loved in your childhood. You're not there anymore, and now we can reclaim those parts. So once you have found and journaled on at least one thing that you have abandoned from yourself because you were told it wasn't okay, I want you to find that one piece, and I want you to start integrating it back into your life. So for me, this is kind of an interesting story, but I don't drink, and really I don't drink, but at one point I didn't drink because it wasn't my, like, I was doing it as a trauma response. So I had a season where I was like, you know what, I really need to develop a real healthy relationship with alcohol. So I'm actually going to drink for a little bit because I never want my decisions to be determined or dictated by somebody else, even subconsciously. And so I realized I was not drinking subconsciously because it was a response to somebody else. Because my joke used to be my ancestors have drank enough that it would last for generations. Like, we don't need to have a drop to drink, and my ancestors' overflow of alcohol would just cover it. And I realized, like, maybe I actually do, I wanted to figure it out and experiment for myself. And so I went through a few seasons where I was drinking, and it was actually really interesting because not drinking often, but I would go out with my friends and have some drinks. And what I realized is, like, I was actually very sassy. Like, when I would get to that buzz point, I'm like, oh shit, I'm super sassy. And I was able to start reclaiming that. So find a quality, find a trait I learned through alcohol. So that's another question you can ask yourself. Like, when you've got a little bit of a buzz, who are you? Because spoiler alert, that's actually a true part of yourself. And then how can you start integrating that back into daily life? So when you're with your friends, can you just be a little more honest? When you have an opinion, maybe you don't share it yet, but when you get in your car, you just tell yourself, actually, I don't believe that. I think that's just a bunch of bullshit. Like, just start being honest about those things. And the last thing to really integrate this is, what do you need to create? So for me, as I start finding my purpose, as I start making some meaning out of this madness, if you will, from the sexual abuse and from losing my dog, I realized I need to start making podcasts. I need to start sharing. I need to write a book. And so this art, this creation, whether it's a business or otherwise, is the integration of all of this and the transmutation from pain into purpose. It's that creativity that really allows us to flip the coin and find purpose on the other side of all this pain and the meaning and the madness, if you will. I love alliterations if you haven't gathered that already. And so that is all I have for you today. I really want you to keep me updated. So if you've tried these exercises and you were able to find one piece of this puzzle, please share them below in the comments. And then also, it really helps me to know what you need help with. So if you have other specific questions, please list them below so I can make episodes out of them, because you doing this helps me help you. Thank you for listening to this short little exercise and episode of the Western Hippie Podcast. If you have not done so already, please rate and subscribe. I think it's rate and review, rate and subscribe, whatever you need to do. I really appreciate your feedback, and just knowing you're going to be here with me every week. So subscribe. That's the word I was looking for. There you go. So if you have not done so yet, please subscribe to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and Willie and I will catch you next week.